Time for another important topic in the world of sound design, reverb. In this video we go over the characteristics of reverb, and part 2 will cover actual reverb plugins. So as you probably know, reverb is a characteristic of the environment a sound is in. When an object emits a sound, say some dialogue coming from an actor, that sound travels around the room and bounces off objects in the area. Those reflections eventually return to our ears, creating the effect of reverb. Different types of rooms have different types of reverb, so it's important to understand those different characteristics when recreating reverb digitally. Another note is that you should be very careful when adding reverb to a track. If the sound was recorded in the environment you want the sound to be in, for example, recording Foley or dialogue on set, you probably don't need to add any more reverb. Too much reverb can very quickly make sounds difficult to hear and cause them to fade into the background. So now let's dive in and talk about the different factors that affect the sound of reverb. The first factor is pre-delay. Pre-delay controls how quickly the reverb will return to the listener. Longer pre-delay makes a room feel bigger, while shorter ones suggest a smaller room. Pre-delay can also be useful to create separation. You may want to put lots of reverb on something important, like a vocal, but doing so makes the vocal difficult to hear. A longer pre-delay can create more separation between the vocal and the reverb, making the vocal pop out again. Decay time controls how quickly reverberations fade away. Longer decays mean the reverb will take longer to fade out, while shorter means quickly disappearing reverb. Environments that have lots of highly reflective surfaces, say for example a gym with its hard floor and brick walls, will have longer delays compared to something like a concert hall with lots of sound dampening in the carpet and the cushioned chairs. Diffusion controls how dispersed reverb is. When a sound hits an object and bounces off, it doesn't just bounce back in one direction. The sound will bounce in many directions. Diffusion controls how wide the sound bounce will be. Less diffusion will give you a more precise clinical sound, while more diffusion will create softer and more scattered reverb. The last tone control you'll generally find on reverb units is damping. Damping occurs when a sound hits an object and some of the higher frequencies are absorbed into the object, meaning those frequencies won't be heard in the reverb. Harder surfaces like laminate and brick will have less damping compared to softer surfaces like carpet and drywall. Now to talk about the different types of reverb. Often you'll see reverb units having different room sizes sorted as room, chamber, hall, spring, and plate reverb, and often some different variations of each of those. Room and hall reverbs are designed to emulate the physical characteristics of an environment, room being smaller and hall being larger. Chamber, spring, and plate reverbs are useful in music recording environments, but they're less useful to sound designers since they don't specifically emulate physical environments. Rather, they're designed to reflect the way reverb was recorded before digital reverb plugins. Chamber reverb emulates highly reflective rooms that were designed for creating reverb, while plate and spring emulate different types of artificial reverb hardware. Chamber can be useful to sound designers, but generally plate and spring reverb should be avoided as they're very artificial. Now to finish off, let's quickly talk about a few controls that reverb plugins typically give you to provide additional control over the sound of your reverb. The big one is the wet and dry controls. Wet and dry controls affect how loud the reverb is compared to the original signal. Dry controls how loud the original signal is, and wet controls the volume of the reverb. Sometimes wet and dry will also be displayed as percentages, where a higher percentage means more wet signal compared to the dry signal. If you're using the reverb plugin on the same channel as the sound you're applying it to, you generally want the dry control of the default and use the wet control to control the amount of reverb. If you're using a bus to apply the reverb, which is generally the best way to apply the same reverb to lots of tracks, then you want the dry control turned all the way down and use the send levels to control the amount of reverb. The other set of controls you'll often see are a high pass and low pass filters. Those controls work just like they do in an equalizer plugin and limit the high and low frequency content of the reverb. Reverb can often create annoying buildup in the very low and very high ends of the frequency spectrum, so the high and low pass controls are useful to prevent that. Some reverb plugins are also designed as stereo reverbs and may have a width control as well. The main note to keep in mind with width is that sometimes you can get phase issues when the reverb is too wide, which means the two stereo reverb channels will cancel each other out in mono. For that reason, it's generally best to avoid using too much widening on reverb. Anyway, that's it for this video. If you like this video, if you learn more about reverb, what it is, how it works, how to use it, hit that like button. If not, feel free to hit the dislike button. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave those in the comment section down below. And if you want to see more videos like this, including the video I mentioned, part 2 of this video, where I'll be going in depth in actual reverb plugins and showing you some different plugins, hit that subscribe button.